course.
Good morning, everyone. Alright, so this is where we left off last time, and we'll go ahead and keep on moving. As you near, you feel a vibrant history contained in the essence of this man's soul. Voices from its past seem to call out to you. You see a ship being tossed about in a ravaged sea. The swells rise and fall, carrying the ship with them as if it were a toy. This man stands on deck at the helm of the ship while water whips around him. The crew moves about frantically, trying to keep the chaos under control. He barks orders at them, pointing where to go and giving each one a task. The men, while still visibly distressed, seem to calm down when they are given the orders. He instructs the helmsman to resume his duties at the wheel and rushes to the aid of a crewman who is struggling with a rope attached to one of the sails. The ship crests a wave, going almost vertical in one direction and then immediately again in another direction. Several of the crew are thrown from their feet, sliding across the deck as the ship rocks. After the swell passes and the ship returns to a relatively normal orientation, the man quickly scans the deck, counting silently. No one has been lost this time, thankfully. He looks into the direction they're headed, seeing no reprieve from the storm in sight. His jaw squared and his upper lip stiffened. He returns to the helm and takes the wheel again. You see a lavishly decorated room, walls hung with tapestries, ornate oil lamps creating a warm, relaxing atmosphere. There are several overstuffed couches covered with silk pillows, and an elegant table in the middle of the floor. This woman is seated at the table, sitting across from another woman. They are both well dressed, their style befitting the room they are in. The other woman's hair is blonde, in stark contrast to this woman's black, and is swept up on her head in a dramatic style. The women speak in an easy, free tone, obviously familiar with one another. Though they each seem to be comfortable in the other's company, a strange nervousness surrounds the blonde woman's actions. She occasionally betrays herself with a little giggle or stammer, hitching over an easy word as she speaks. Her demeanor swings from friendly to shy and back again with no warning. This woman leans back in her chair, stretching lightly. As she finishes her stretch, she gently lays her hand next to the other woman's hand, letting the fingers subtly intertwine. The second woman stops speaking mid-sentence, inhales sharply, and turns red. She does not, however, move her hand. This woman smiles and moves her hand further over the other, holding it, and then stands moving around the table toward the blonde woman, whose face shows conflicting emotions of terror and lust. She giggles and pulls her hand from under the other's and brings it to her mouth. The red of her face deepening, this woman stops, looking down at her, eyes sparkling. She reaches out, pulls something from the blonde hair, letting it fall around her shoulders. Then she leans over, brushing her lips slightly over the blonde woman's cheek, resting her mouth against her ear. As she whispers, her hand moves lightly down the other woman's body to her waist. The blonde woman shudders and leans into the hand, eyes closing, cheek pressing against the lips, still whispering in at her ear. The woman's hand deftly moves a small bag from the other woman's belt and secrets it under her cloak in the small of her back. Then she gently kisses the other woman's cheek and stands again, a smile never leaving her mouth. She's got. That's what that was. You see a flurry of matted white hair and an incandescent freeze fire staff before you see the man, cold and wild. He chews a wizened apple slowly, discharging spell after spell into the jumble of villagers screeching their way towards him. Cold flame vents from his nose and apple seeds shoot out from the side of his mouth as he saunters forward. Ignoring arrows and curses alike, a deliberate twist of his staff and a bullet of force glides through the torso of one assailant and another. A roar blisters his throat as he launches himself into the mists. tearing into their essence with his staff. A pleading hand reaches towards him and quickly falls, ignored. Silence takes hold as the tattered man gathers his prize, a basket of fresh pears. He hums as he eats. Alright, so we finally made it into Defiance Bay. So this is our first time coming here. So
the city at the heart of the Deerwoods Revolution now seems on the brink of another. Refugees line the streets, homeless and hungry, displaced by White One's legacy, hoping for relief within the city walls, and finding none. Dissidents congregate to protest and to heckle, calling for an end to animancy and the ouster of their duke. The city's militiamen cast fearful looks as they patrol the streets, their hands trembling at the hilts of their weapons. The capital of a country that had not long ago incinerated a god now appears to be a spark away from sharing the deity's fate.
Oh man,
Defiance
this is a big city.
There was a dry field in need of a cleansing flame. You have found it.
Hello.
Rowan's arms are closed and his mouth is set in a grim frown as he watches the gathered protesters. He looks ready for a fight. He sizes you up. New in town, eh? You've picked an interesting time to visit Defiance Bay. All these refugees fleeing from the frontier and finding the legacies no better here. It's the Animancers. Mogren scorched them, and they nest in the city like rats. You mark my words, though, us dozens are going to put a stop to it. Dozens. What are you doing out here? He gestures at the crowd, which buzzes with angry chatter, trying to get folk to see reason. We're in the midst of a crisis, and instead of purging the nefarious forces from our city, the Duck is granting Animancers dangerous liberties. What do you know about Animancy? It's the study and manipulation of essence, which any sane person will tell you is the purview of the gods. The Adrians at least had the sense to outlaw it, which is the only good thing you can say about them. It's not like magic chanting or the soul readings those ciphers do. It's been around since ancient Ingwethan times, which is why you'll see Animancers tinkering with old Ingwethan artifacts. Gunners raises a fist to cough discreetly into it. Half-truths all. But he's an enthusiastic performer, I'll give him that. He shakes his head. Trouble is, the Animancers got no idea what half of those artifacts actually do. Not that they'll admit it. Our emphatic friend is correct about one thing, at least. Tell me about the dozens. We're an organization of interested civilians who want to free Defiance Bay from the dangerous influence of Animancers and the tyranny of those aristocrats who support them. We also consider ourselves a militia of sorts, seeing as the Crucible Knights are little more than a flock of preening nobles in training these days. Just like a militia, the dozens, except for the training and the discipline and the code of honor. His eyes gleam, and we're always looking to expand. The more people see things our way, the better for the state of the country. You have any interest in hearing more, stop by Admeth's Den sometime, the Expedition Hall. A lot of free thinkers in there can set straight all the nonsense the nobles and the Animancers want you to believe. Might even be some paid work there for motivated types. I would like to know more about Defiance Bay. This is the capital of the free Palatinate of the Direwood. We started out as the capital of an Adrian colony, but we boosted the flaccid scepter from these lands 150 years ago. These days we are a major port receiving trade and visitors from all over the world, but we, some of us anyway, strive to hold on to the pioneering spirit that earned us our freedom in a century and a half ago. The city is divided into 5 districts: Copper Lane, First Fires, Andra's Gift, Brackenbury, and Heritage Hill. Tell me about Copper Lane. This here is Copper Lane. He taps a scuffed boot on the cobblestone. It's primarily a market district, but you also got the Expedition Hall directly north of here, where you can join treks into the wilds. That's also where my fellow dozens, Matt Tires, and I tend to meet up with other concerned citizens. He points to a long domed building west and to the north of your position, and that is the Hall of Revealed Mysteries. Eerie place, you ask me, but they've got the biggest library in all of Direwood. Eerie, indeed. It might be less so if more kids stepped inside. Perhaps we ought to visit Grizz, and we'll see what mysteries are revealed. Brackenbury. The nobility that didn't sail back to Adir stayed there. Most of the families there traced their lineage back to the old imperial times. Other than a lot of has-been nobility, you've got Hadrit House, where Lady Webb and her spies operate, in the Brackenbury Sanitarium, the main cesspit of animancy in the city. He spits on the cobblestones. Tell me about First Fires. That's where the revolution started, hence the name. These days, it's overrun with politicians and panderers, but we'll take it back someday. That's where you'll find Dussel Palace and the Villayan Embassy and the Crucible Keep. The Crucible Knights are the original freedom fighters in Defiance Bay, but now they're just strutting peacocks with their eyes on fancy titles and their heads up their asses. There's an old temple of Boudica there too. We keep it real nice for her. He winks. Andra's Gift. Got the name because it is the wetland that was drained back in the imperial days. Now, it's a seedy district populated by sailors, common folk, and more than a few thugs. But it's a fun place too if you know where to look. Kewing snubbles you. Look for a place called Salty Mast when you're there. Other than that, there's mostly warehouses and abandoned homes. Heritage Hill. It used to be one of the most prestigious districts in the city. Heroes of the Revolution claimed plots up there, next to an ancient Iguithan tower in the city cemetery. It had the best views in Defiance Bay. Attracts richer types these days. A lot of animancy patrons. He glances at the crowd and lowers his voice. You wouldn't have heard, but something's happened there a couple months ago. The authorities sealed it off, and they were keeping their mouths shut. But mark my words, animancy is to blame. Never mind, talking about something else. Farewell. Alright, so we just got a big thing of history about the city. Let's take a quick look around. Alright, so I'm looking for the Temple of Boudica. I don't know if you say so. It's in First Fires, just west of Crucible Keep. Alright. What is this? The Goose and the Fox. Probably an inn. So we're going to be going to all these buildings. Seeing what we can find. You know, there's probably a lot of quests here. Oh, this place is empty. All these guys are going to have histories, yay. You see a fire burning slowly on the side of a winding road, unmanned. There seems to be no fuel, no wood, no oil for it to consume, no hay or twigs. Despite this, it roars and crackles, wails in the wind. It takes you a moment, but you begin to notice a figure in the flames. A shaking hands cradle a young face, molten red tears marring the skin color of coal. The boy cowers, flame coating him until he holds his knees to his chest. In the distance, a man approaches, faceless. He extends a hand to the frightened child, who has considered it warily before taking it. The flames die down, leaving his limbs and settling on his head like obedient pets. All tears dried, they walked together, fire and death, hand in hand. You see a wizard playing illusions in a town square, fingers plucking color, and the sound from the air and weaving scenes of beauty and fright. A crowd of onlookers gasps and cheers, enthralled with the display. All but one boy, standing off to the side, mouth agape, green eyes are pale with wonder. Vision after vision playing out before him, and then something inside the boy clicks. Without warning, he bolts, disappearing into the crowd, pushing and shoving desperately. The mage finishes the show soon after, a giant silver dragon descending through the crowd and 1,000 stars exploding into nothingness. Collecting coins, he walks around the clapping crowd, bowing and nodding at each as he passes until a small sack is dropped into his hands. The boy stands for a moment before him, small and still, and begs the wizard to apprentice him. He glances at the hefty bag, weighing it and the boy carefully. Finally, he nods and flicks gently at the bag, which disappears. The boy grins. "How'd you do that?" he asked, but the illusionist merely winks. You see a hand curled and bruised, staked on the floor with a bent metal spike. Blood covers the floor and drips from the furnishings and walls. This man looks up from the body he is crouched over to survey the carnage he caused to the family in whose house he now skulks. 4 bodies total, a woman, 2 young men, and a girl, lie blindfolded on the ground. Their legs are bound and their hands are attached to the floor with spikes. He has lifted the woman's blindfold and is currently doing something to her eyes. He pulls back a small blade and covers the eyes again. Gently patting the blindfold, he stands and looks around, seemingly satisfied with his handiwork. Suddenly, his breath quickens, hearing someone approach the door to the room. He bounces in place, excitement almost overwhelming him, then rushes back to the back of the room, concealing himself in the shadows. From his vantage, he sees the bodies are perfectly arranged, each one facing the door, welcoming the man of the house back, arms outstretched as if in embrace. The door opens slowly and pulls another spike from his belt, the tip of his tongue playing across the teeth and in his teeth in anticipation.
Gods keep you.
Name's Bishop. Used to be a scholar of Bareth. Now I run the Goose and Fox and keep the regulars in line. What's there more to tell? How'd you go from religious to taverns? The journey isn't long as you think. It started with Hollowborn and with this. He takes a black bottle from under the bar and fills up the pewter cup. It was my sister's son. At the beginning of the Waidwen's legacy, he was one of the first. I never expected there would be so many after him. Tragedy is part of cycle, but it's followed by rebirth. Yet every year more patrons are grieving from their Hollowborn children, and the gods were silent. So you lost your faith? Bareth promises rebirth cycles, but not only cycle I found was this one. He taps the bar. Have a drink, have another, and another until I can't remember how I got home. Wake up, come back. I finally woke up one day to see my family had packed up and left. For all I know, they left days before and I just hadn't noticed. But they were gone, so I came here. I've cleaned up since then. Not that I found my answers. He tosses the cup back, but I've stopped asking questions. See what the rooms look like. Oh, we have upgrades. Sweet. 1 perception, 1 resolved, 2 dex, 1 survival, 10 defense, 1 intellect, 2 lore, 1 athletics, mechanics, and 5 ranger's accuracy. Sweet. Alright. Oh, looks like a quest. A woman sits by herself, spinning something around the table in front of her and watching it with a furious intensity. It's about the size of a coin, and it wobbles over a crack in the wood with a metallic rattle. She snatches up with the one hand, slams the half-empty cup down on the table with the other. This is not a good time. You look like you could use another drink. I'll get there. She takes a long drink from her glass, just trying to calm down and trying to talk myself out of something foolish. Something foolish? She says nothing for moments and hoping you leave at last. Kinera looks up at you, and the lamplight falls across her face. A purpling bruise is blossoming on the other cheekbone. There's something I need to give my fiancé, Pernisk, only he doesn't seem to go anywhere without his new friends. They're not exactly pleasant company. Who hit you? I know how it looks, but you don't understand. It's not like Pernisk. It's his new friends of his. They brought out the worst in him. Tell me about these new friends. They come into our house with their dead eyes and their black teeth. I'm not a fool. I know what it means. Pernisk makes me leave when they show up, but it's obvious they've come to do. Last time they came, I told them to get out. Let them have their fun somewhere in the gift, but it's not under my roof. She scowls and then winces, her fingertips gently probing her bruise. Svev changes you, I guess. To Pernisk, I know wouldn't have squashed a spider. I never thought he'd. She trails off, feeling the swollen, discolored flesh. This makes people calm and listeners. It shouldn't make them violent. I really don't know. Seem better than believing he's always been this way. Maybe I could go talk to him. There's nothing more to say to him. We're finished. What's up, Dirty? I'm good, man. How are you? I just want to give this back to him and have a clean break. She opens her hand and a ring clatters on the table. It was his grandmother's. Even after this, I don't have the heart to sell it off. But if I go back there myself, I know what'll happen. I'll lose my temper and I'll probably wind up with another one of these. But I've heard you're trustworthy. If you give this back to him, he'll know we're done. I'll take the ring. The house is just north of here. Just please don't hurt him. As fierce as I am, I don't want that on my conscience. I feel you, man. Yeah. Luckily, this game's pretty chill, so I can kind of just sit back and relax. Jesus. All right. You see mud-soaked clearing, rain falling to the ground in large drops. This man is lying on his back in the muck, his hands holding open the maw of an enormous Stelgare that stands over him. His front paws on his chest, the heavy rain falls over them, playing counterpoint to the grunts made by the opponents. Dead Stelgare litter the ground around them, and the man's body shows sign of a difficult battle. His clothing is torn, hanging in the scraps in some places, bites and scratches over his arms and legs. A huge gash cuts across his forehead. Blood and water mixing as they run down his face and drip into the mud. It takes all the man's effort to keep the beast's jaws from clamping down. The man looks wildly until the gaze finally lands on a large axe lying barely within the arm's reach behind his head. The rain slowly covering it with grime and muddy water. He looks at the Stelgare and then back at his axe. Grim determination on his face. His arms are shaking and it seems he will not be able to hold the beast back for much longer. He takes a deep breath, wraps his right hand around the Stelgare's bottom jaw, then lets go with his left hand, freeing the top of its head. The Stelgare's mouth snaps shut on his right hand as the left hand shoots above his head and grabs the handle of his axe. The Stelgare grinds its teeth and pulls back, trying to free itself from his grip. Blood dripping down its mouth onto his face. With a grunt that quickly comes to a bellow of pain, the man pulls his right hand down, bringing the beast's head closer to him. Swinging the axe around as he does, the blade of the weapon pierces the Stelgare's neck, and it yelps, its mouth popping open as it tries to step backward off the man. Before his mangled hand can lose its grip, the man pulls and twists as hard as he can, trying to get the beast on the ground. Using Stoker's resistance to pull himself into a sitting position, he brings the axe down on the neck again and again, and one final time as its head and his hand simultaneously come free. The head flies from his grip and thrusts his hand behind its head to brace himself as he falls, and his hand hits the ground and his full weight lands on it. A second bellow of pain erupts from his mouth. Breathing heavily, he brings his now mangled hand up to assess the damage. The little finger is gone, lost somewhere in the mud. Two fingers next to it are twisted, broken, and torn, barely attached to his hand by small bits of flesh. He sighs. Grabbing both dangling fingers with his left hand, he grits his teeth and pulls. Thanks, Glenn. Greatly appreciate it, man.
I'll get it open. Finished.
Bartender's ring. Spirit Bane vessel plus 5 will. Why not? Alright, let's go check upstairs, see if there's anything. I doubt there's any oh, totally could have cut through there.
Ready, Watcher.
What?
You see an impressive gathering of wild Orlans in ceremonial dress, shaded by a corpse of ancient oaks. Underneath the largest oak stand 2 young Orlans, hands clasped, eyes near clear as they promise to care for and love one another in the joining of their clans. An older Orlan steps toward them to speak, beards seeming to sprout from every direction under his eyes, and declares their union complete. The jubilant Orlan clans carry the newly wedded couple away to their tent with snorts of laughter and crude jokes, leaving the older Orlan to sit alone beneath an aged old oak. He sighs, observing the scene in the distance. He whispers a quiet benediction, glad for their gladness, and melts into the trees without another word. He has seen enough happiness for one day. You see a half-consumed ale slosh. You see a half-consumed ale slosh its way through the distance to his mouth, spilling across the stains of food long past. Glazed eyes glance at the brawl across the room, gaining fervor as the fight extends through the room. Another ale, he murmurs to the bartender, downing his drink and turning toward the wall. He pulls a picture from his pocket, a painting from a young child, all brown hair and green eyes, and holds it above the candle. It does not burn. Ales later, he begins to sing. The bar, a mess of broken chairs and wounded pride. They all listen for a moment before continuing their drinks, fed conversations. His ache is felt through the room. His sad story reminds them of their sad stories. When he finishes singing, a silence hangs in the air, palpable among the smoke and the sweat, and the yeasty smell of beer-infused exhalation. He is the first to break the silence, ordering another round of ale for the room. The general din of conversation sparks and resumes, but the mirth now is tempered with far-off memories and thoughts.